Welcome in, welcome back, and welcome to another episode of that's Lysander Spooner, the Legacy Right. And just like what we've been doing at the start of each show at this point, new thing, perspective. Perspective is like a cigar. It's a process. You got to go through that process in order to enjoy yourself a good smoke. You got to pick out the cigar. You got to you got to take the bite. No, I use my teeth. Probably not the best thing for an even cut, but you got to cut it. You got to light it, heat it. Tobacco, many different strains of tobacco, just like many different perspectives. So no matter where you are on any type of perspective, any type of spectrum within the realm of society today, whether that be politics or culture, that's where we're at. That's where we stand. So with that, I am the legacy of Jennifer Int Kaiser. I am your host, your captain, engage Zachary Kaiser, and welcome aboard there to my number one, Andrew Joseph. So
I don't think so, Tim.
I use Star Trek references. He's a home improvement type of guy, right? Funny guy, funny guy.
Yeah.
So we got a special guest for you today. Um, Kind of gets around along the libertarian circles. Um, let's go ahead and introduce our special guest for today, Joshua Eakle. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. What about you guys?
Doing pretty good.
Awesome.
Doing
Yeah, I know we've been talking back and forth about doing something like this for a long time, so I'm glad that we were finally able to make it happen. I think it was like 3 months ago when we first connected. So it's
Yeah.
been a crazy quarter. Let's leave it at that.
yep. I mean, life goes on and everybody's busy. So I'm glad that
Absolutely.
we could finally do this. Let's dive into it. First off, Josh, for our listeners' side, just tell us your spiel, what you're into. I mean, what ticks inside the old Joshua Inkle there, and what kind of projects are you into?
So my background, and I gather this would be interesting to your audience that you guys are kind of in the libertarian space. My background is I have been a libertarian party organizer actually for about 12 years. I got involved in the liberty movement actually during the Ron Paul days in the early 2010s. I was a volunteer for Gary Johnson. I ran the largest county affiliate in the nation in like the late 2010s in Knox County, actually, and was the state chairman of the Libertarian Party of Tennessee for a couple of years. I was the field director for the Prague Caucus. I worked for Congressman Amash when he ran for president, his national delegate coordinator. And the reason, and there's a lot more to unpack there, but not involved in the Libertarian Party anymore. The reason I think you mentioned I get around the Libertarian movement is because I just somehow have a way to piss off all the Libertarians. I'm not sure how that happens. Maybe intentional, maybe unintentional. But I was involved in starting the Classical Liberal Caucus, which was the last remaining opposition to the establishment of the party after 2022, which is the Mises PAC. Not involved in the party anymore, but that's probably how you guys found me, I gather. And there's a lot more to unpack on kind of like, because I've got some bigger stuff that I'm trying to build that's a little bit outside of the party, but it's
Hmm.
still related to many of the things that libertarians are passionate about, like individual freedom and, limited government and free expression and free trade and things like that. But yeah, that's my origin story. Happy to dig into anything I can dig into for you guys so that you think your audience might be interested in.
I mean, it's fascinating that you said we probably heard of you from everybody hating you, but yeah, I mean, for different takes. I mean, why
Yeah.
is it? Why is that the case? Like, why is it that do haters hate once you have haters, you made it? I guess
I
so,
do
or
think
or
that
is
if
the
you do
party just
I do
oh
think that
go
if you're involved in politics, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this, and you have and you actually are engaged in that process and you have a vision or an opinion about how things should be, you're going to piss off half the room, right? That's just the
hmm
way that it works. This is the nature of politics. I did kind of put a target on my back because I was effectively, I was involved in the party during its peak, right? So like when we got like 5 million votes in 2016, and with the Masha's campaign, and when we had 400 elected officials across the country, and then when the Mises PAC took over in 2022, when all the opposition collapsed, because I'm not sure how familiar or how long you guys have been involved in the party, but like there was a sizable establishment caucus and an opposition. Like there was a leadership of the party. All of that collapsed in 2021. And so when the PAC took over the party in 2022, I basically said, hey, look, I'm going to at least give this a good old college try, and I'm going to work with this team to start an opposition to these people. And so I did go to war with them a bit and publicly fight them and kind of be publicly about the things that I didn't like that they were doing. And so that's probably one of the reasons why at least that crew doesn't like me. On the other side, it just matters what group you're talking to, because everyone's got a different reason. But
nobody, there's no such thing as a real libertarian, right?
Exactly.
Nobody's a real libertarian.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I mean, like for us, like I mean, me and Andrew, we would consider ourselves not real libertarians, right? We're agorists, so like we look at politics and we're like, gross, man. I'd rather just like do my thing and just leave everybody else alone, like, and leave me alone. And if we need to interact let's interact. Let's build a relationship. I mean, I'm all for building relationships, especially now. I mean, if you want to jump into the political idea, and this leads to my next question on the topic. What is your what do you think about using coalitions maybe on the local level, since there's so much fighting up on the top on the national level, it seems, using that local niche and focusing more in local jurisdictions, counties, just with the party and trying to figure out ways to nullify rather than putting so much into the big bag of national politics.
Yeah, actually, I can definitely comment on that from my personal work in like local grassroots stuff. But to zoom out for 1 second before I get into the specifics, you did ask the thing that makes me tick, and this might kind of frame the different perspective that I might have versus maybe a lot of the agorists and people in your communities. I'm really like my whole like life's goal when I got out of high school was I want to build a coherent libertarian or classically liberal political movement that can defeat these people that I thought were ruining the country, right? So I'm very focused on like getting votes and getting people elected. Like that's the kind of stuff that makes me tick. But to your point about local stuff, when I was back years ago, when I was the state chair of the Libertarian Party of Tennessee, we did take a very local focus on our electoral work. And the reason I say that is, well, the reason why we did that strategically was, I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with like ballot access laws, but in the state of Tennessee, for example, if you want to try to say, let's get a state rep, right? That could maybe vote to nullify a law, right? Let's just say that. Let's say we want to get a state rep elected to office in Tennessee, and they want to run as a libertarian or any other third party. Republicans have to get 25 signatures. Democrats have to get 25 signatures. Libertarians have to get something like 58,000 signatures for statewide access, and several thousand if you want to run locally. So we were in a situation where we made a decision that we needed to focus on building a local coalition, trying to find nonpartisan elected officials, maybe the strategy of trying to get people into local office, very small local office, and try to drive things that way. And we were pretty successful. We got like 6 or 7 local nonpartisan people. We had a mayor get elected of Troutdale County and several other county commissioners and city councilors. The one thing that I'd say about nullification as a concept is I think it comes from a point of good faith. But when you look systematically, like in the big picture of how nullification works, the problem with the system is most of the things that you may want to try to nullify at the local level will get overruled by much bigger powers than you, states, or whether that's the federal government. That's actually one of my issues with like focusing a lot on defend the guard stuff, which is what I know a lot of the people in like the Mises PAC focus on, is because it's basically about passing local legislation to say we're not going to comply with federal mandates, but that doesn't actually hold up in court. Like the federal government will come in and overrule that, right? So it seems to me to be difficult. The one thing I will say, and I think agorists get this right, I mean, it's like, and this is also kind of part of the ANCAP zeitgeist, so to speak, is there is incredible value in trying to build community, trying to understand who your neighbors are, really understand your neighbors, meet them, talk to them, be friends with them, help them when they need help. Building local community is something that I feel like people nowadays just don't really think about. I mean, half the people don't know who their neighbors are. If you had an emergency, you can't go across the street. And that stuff is actually very important. Not only to just make sure that you have a safe and secure and comfortable family and all that stuff, but it's also very like societally important, as people kind of get like siloed off into their own little bubbles. I feel like that's an incredible area that people should think more about is who are your neighbors? How can you help them? And it's positive. I mean, it's not only positive societally, but it actually is emotionally valuable, and it kind of brings in security and helps you if you have a challenge or an issue or something like that. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but that's just kind of my overall thought about the topic.
Yeah, I mean, good response. And like, speaking of neighbors and not what do you think that is? That we're just not very close with one another. I mean, could it be politics? Could it be 9/11? Maybe. Could it be just maybe us millennials have gotten older and we were raised a certain way uh, to be scared of everything, I
Yeah.
guess, like with stranger danger. I mean, what do you think that is
There could
that
be.
community is?
Yeah, there could be some of that cultural stuff going on where like we
Mm-hmm.
were raised and not really kind of out and about doing things like maybe the older generations would be. I actually think it kind of centers around just a collapse of like the gathering places and community building locations of American life. So like, I'm an agnostic atheist, right? So I'm not religious, but I was raised
Mm-hmm.
religious. And I was talking to you a bit before we got on the show about my background. My dad was the evangelical pastor, and I traveled across the country
Mm-hmm.
moving across the country to do stuff with him. And I think a lot of the community building stuff in the past centered around institutions like that, like the church, in many places, especially in the Deep South, and different civic institutions and clubs and things like that. And I think participation in those types of things are going down overall. I think that comes with some good and some bad. But I think that's probably the underlying thing. And then on top of that, you add social media, and everyone's got these like weird, like literally everyone's looking into a world. They have their own version of the world that is uniquely curated for them. And so everyone
Yeah.
kind of has their own, you know what I mean? Their own like bias.
Their own
And
impression.
yeah, exactly. Imagine this too. If you've got
Mm-hmm.
a neighbor and you go, that's what I think is like, it's probably a bigger thing than people realize. And I experience this all the time. If you've got a neighbor that you're talking to and they have their own curated version of the world and you have your own curated version of the world and you try to make a human connection there, it's kind of difficult to do that because you're operating with kind of a different slew of facts. And so whether it's even
Mm-hmm.
intentional or needed, or like whether it's intentional or like just something subtle, I think that probably makes people drift apart more because we're not operating in the same consensus, right?
Yeah.
We all watch different
Yeah.
shows, we're all seeing different kind of angles on the world, and so that
Mm-hmm.
I think just kind of slowly drifts people apart. But I think it's a series of a lot of things. I think that you can fight
Yeah.
back against that by trying to be kind to people and trying to meet your neighbors, as we talked about before. But yeah, I don't know if it's going to be good. I don't think it's a positive thing for society at all. I think we need to find some way to solve that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember like being a kid, you'd move into a new neighborhood and the nice old neighbor lady from across the street would come over and knock on
Yep.
your door and bring you bring you cupcakes or cookies, or and then you do the same. Then mom would do the same thing with them, or vice versa. When someone new moves into the neighborhood, we did like my mom really was big on that. So like, and you really don't see that. I mean, I moved into a new house in 2019, and I think I tried to say hello to my neighbors more so than them trying to reach out to find out who this new person is. It's like, I mean, I get it. I mean, people want to be sequestered into their own mesh in their own world, but at the same time, you need people. Like you can't always, family's not always going to be there. It's
Yep.
great to have family, but it's also great to go make an extension of that family. And
Yeah.
I think that's where
Mm.
we're missing now is everybody's just too close knit, like you said. Like
Yeah.
we're too enclosed to our own thoughts. I mean, and it's just making us more scared to jump out of our own shell, I guess. So
Yeah, and to add a little story to that. Well, first to say, I think the solution to that is embodying what you think the world should be in yourself. So if we're frustrated about neighbors not bringing us food or welcoming us, then we should be the neighbors that welcome people, right? This goes back to kind of what you were talking about at the beginning of the show. It's
Hmm.
like doing what you can with your own tools. Like I think that's a
Hmm.
component. And I'm not great at that either. I'm kind of an introvert. So it's like going to knock on a neighbor's door. But I do try to do that. Like I talk to my neighbors and have conversations with them, and you
Hmm.
try to embody it yourself. I think that's the first thing. Second thing is it's very, very important for all the reasons you mentioned. I give you an example. When my wife was pregnant with our first son, she was due, and an ice storm hit, and we could not leave our house because we had at the time I had like this little coupe that had like it was like rear wheel drive coupe, and I just couldn't get out of the driveway because it was
Yeah.
I don't have that car anymore, but I did. And so we reached out to some of our neighbors and told them what was going on. Like, hey, her water could break at any minute. Like, we can't get to the hospital if that happens. And we had neighbors that were like offering to help take us, bring their four-wheeler out to the house. And that's really where it matters, right? Because those are the
Hmm.
kind of things that you can't do if you're siloed off or
Yeah.
if you don't know who to talk to or where to reach them or how to call them, that kind of thing. So,
I think
Yeah, man, that's
the
awesome.
big problem is that inflation distorts people's time preference. So it's a lot harder for them to get to settle down and get to know their neighbors because they're always having to go, go, go. And, the more the inflation is, the more they have to work. So now the wife has to work, and it distorts the family dynamic.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think that we should. It's a better thing if people are wealthier overall, right? Like that's
Yeah.
a good thing because if people have more capital and they have more wealth and they have more time to focus on the things that matter. You can talk about Maslow. Oh, is it Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Maybe I'm screwing that up, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to get to self-actualization unless you can have your lights turned on and you can have food on the table. So that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of an unapologetic capitalist, right? And a free market person is because I think the best way to solve that is to enrich people's lives and to free trade and even globalization has been like the greatest tool to like pull people out of poverty and enrich people's lives. And as bad as things have been, especially, I mean, I'm sure Andrew, you're referring to some of the stuff that happened after COVID. The
Hmm.
United States, because of, I'm sure the same capitalist principles that we all agree with on this call, is still the wealthiest country in the history of the world with the highest standard
Mm.
of living in any other country. And I think that's why we should absolutely embrace capitalism and free market principles because it's hand in hand. You're not going to be building community, enriching your lives unless you can kind of take care of your basic needs. And capitalism is the best system that has been devised to do that. Period. Hard stop.
Yeah, definitely free markets, exchange, being able to interact with people and produce things like in your own backyard. And I mean, it makes for a more fulfilling society, like when we're able to help each other and build
Yes.
things and consume things that we can actually attain, like using those scarce resources all around us. So it could be a garden in your house or in your backyard. And I mean, give your neighbors some tomatoes for, I don't know, for maybe you have a neighbor with a cow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I
I
don't know if
mean,
you
just
guys had
little
this.
things.
I don't know if you guys had the same experience I did during COVID, but that kind of came into full context for me during COVID. Like when I was going to the grocery store and seeing like empty shelves and stuff, I was like, you
Hmm.
know what? I really need to invest more time in like figuring out how to grow my own food in case this does happen,
Hmm.
right? Figuring out who's the local, find some farmers locally so that I can go directly to the source. I think that's a good, healthy thing. I mean, I definitely don't want to diminish like the value of, or I go back to the capitalist thing. Like it's obviously great that we can go to the grocery store and for like pennies on the
Hmm.
dollar find all these great products everywhere. But it is also good to know how to do it yourself, how to sustain yourself in case not everyone can afford to do that, and also not everyone
Yeah.
has land to do that. Like I tried to, I
Hmm.
tried to put, I tried to put, I did like some gardening or like growing my own food during COVID. Like tried to put some plots down, and I found I didn't have enough land and I didn't have enough light, so. It's not easy for everyone, but I do think it's an important thing to do, or at least to understand how to do in case something does go crazy,
Well,
Yeah, but oh, go ahead, Andrew.
say in the business we call this foreshadowing, right? Uh, I mean, if you think back to COVID, you remember that there was all this uproar and controversy because Walmart was trying to block people from buying seeds and stuff like that.
I do actually remember that. In Michigan, I
Yeah,
think they had a whole like gardening section that they just shut down, and I was like, "What the heck is
yeah,
that all about?" Yeah,
yeah. So,
I
when shit hits the fan, the people are they're not gonna let you just do what you want. They're gonna block you at every opportunity that they have. I
yeah,
mean,
I don't know enough about that specific anecdote, but I could say that if at the very minimum, it is absolutely smart to understand how to take care of yourself, understand your
yeah,
neighbor, and that at the very center of like of all this is something that people should think more about.
Hmm.
Like if you need to know how to do these things at the very minimum so that if you ever have a need, you can act on that need. I'm still
yeah.
Hmm.
terrible at it, by the way, guys. I tried to grow some food and I think we got like 4 or 5 good tomatoes out of it. The rest of the plant was just they were terrible. So this is after me trying for 2 years, but I'm trying, right?
Hey,
So
failure is a recipe of success.
mhm.
Exactly, exactly. Speaking of tomatoes, the same way. The last 3 years, I've grown cucumbers and peppers and tomatoes outside. Same with you, the same as you. I couldn't. The tomatoes just weren't coming, and
Yep.
now I'm about. I got 3 tomato plants out there, and I'm about to have a shit ton of tomatoes this year.
Nice.
So I mean, it's time, energy, patience. I mean,
My
failure. Yeah,
Yeah,
gotta fail.
my sister has this big property and she does that kind of stuff where she's got a green thumb and she'll grow that. She also does that, raising
Hmm.
chickens and raising, you know what I mean, for the eggs and to obviously kill and eat. As I say, not everyone could do it, but it is a valuable
Hmm.
skill. So,
Hmm. And what's cool is like if you don't want to do it, then you can meet people. Like say your sister, I mean, she can make relationships with other people to come and get eggs or come and get chicken. She can slaughter a chicken for them or whatnot, vegetables. So like you don't necessarily have to actually learn how to do this, but what the best thing to do is, especially if you're not in an area where you can grow it, is go try to find somebody that you can like learn a little bit from what they have and then meet them and learn who they are and then just do business with them. And then maybe instead of business down the road, you're just friends and then you can do other things for them that you can do or you can get. I mean,
Hmm.
or whatever. I mean, what have you, really?
and now
So, I
we're
mean,
back to capitalism. That basically is
mm-hmm,
what society is scaled up, right? Like that's
Yeah.
why capitalism is a great system.
mm-hmm,
One of the things I did is try to find a local farmer. We've been buying like bulk beef, which has been great. Again, I'm not say the concept of a grocery store is effectively that concept scaled up, except we're doing that exchange with people we've never met, right? With major corporations
mm-hmm,
that produce this stuff for way cheaper. But I do think like also buying local is good too. Understanding where your food comes is important. And
mm-hmm.
I don't know about you guys, whether you guys have ever bought like local meat like I don't know from like not from the store, but after doing that, I tell you right now the quality is crazy different. I can't even buy it at a grocery store now without being like, okay, this tastes awful. Maybe it's just
Mm-hmm.
that I've had too much of it, but yeah, it's valuable. Don't want to derail
Oh,
us.
it is. I lived, yeah, for 10 years out of my teenage life. Oh man, that's what that's all I ate was like a real cow. So had a whole deep freezer, real cow, just entire whole cow, just filling up a deep freezer.
Yeah, I've
So
got 2 toddlers, so
yeah.
it's very valuable to just bulk buy
Mm-hmm.
beef and then just it's also cheaper actually, and it tastes better. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, plus they want burgers, then you just go downstairs or upstairs or wherever your deep freezer is, kitchen, garage, what grab some burgers. Kids are
There
happy
you go.
for the night. So
Absolutely.
so get yourself some fries and you got some burgers and some real burgers and fries. So mm-mm.
Well said.
Are you con yeah, are you contemplating raising a concern, question, topic, Andrew?
I was just thinking back. I think I met you once back in 2016 when Gary Johnson was running. in
You and I did?
Knoxville. I think
Oh,
so. I was at
really?
one
Were
of the
you in
local
Knoxville?
meetings. Yeah,
Oh, did you come to one of our local ones?
I did once. Yeah,
Okay, that was so you that was almost 10 years ago now, but I don't know
yeah.
which one you came to, but we had some pretty big meetings. I don't know if you came earlier in the year or later, but we used to have, lawmakers come out there and have great
Hmm.
speakers, and it was a good community.
Yeah.
Maybe at one of the Pueblo's Grill meetings that we used to have, or
I
that
think
one.
that's where it was. Yeah,
Yeah. Throwback. Cannot believe it's almost been 10 years.
yeah,
Time flies and things have changed. So
Yes.
yeah, Andrew had just moved away from Knoxville. So I
yeah.
mean, do you miss it, Andrew?
I mean, it's got its perks. So,
Yeah,
but
it's
everywhere's
beautiful.
got
It's
its
a beautiful
trade-offs.
part of the it's a beautiful part of the world. I mean, one of the things I loved about living in Knoxville was when you get up every day and like commute in, you get to be surrounded by that bowl of mountains, I'm
Yeah.
sure you know what I'm talking about. That was the
Hmm.
coolest part about living in
Mm.
Knoxville. It's just an absolute beautiful city.
Hmm. Speaking of Knoxville and Knox County, what are your thoughts on what old Kane is doing over there?
So I've met Kane multiple times. He used to come to our meetings before he decided to run for mayor. I haven't followed like the nuances. I haven't lived in Knoxville for 5 years, so I haven't followed the nuances of many of his policy decisions.
Hmm.
I know that, I know my assumption based on what I have seen is that, he's big in on school choice and big in on trying to keep the budget under control, which I think are two good things.
Yeah.
Hmm.
One thing that has disappointed me about Kane in recent years is I've seen him very much lean heavily into the Maga movement. He has gone full blown into Trumpism. He, God, the one thing that sticks out to me was I remember him reposting content like in 2020, 2021 around like BLM stuff about like sticking the police on people. I don't know. I haven't followed him enough in recent years to even have a strong opinion on how he's governed Knox County. But the one thing that has disappointed me is I think MAGA and libertarianism are inherently incompatible ideologies. And so I've been really
Yeah.
disappointed to see him do that. But I will
Hmm.
say, if I'm going to put on my cynical political hat, right, like I understand the incentives that have driven him to make that decision, which is he
Yeah.
is in Knox County, which is a deep red Trump country county. I don't have to tell you guys that. This is Tennessee, where like plus 30 Trump,
Hmm.
so crazy like that.
Mm.
So if he wants to win in that context, he's got to throw red meat. I One of the reasons why I'm a huge fan of Congressman Amash, who, like many other people that came into politics during the Tea Party movement, which is when I came into politics, is that Amash did not allow MAGA to infect his principles. So a lot of people in the Republican Party went full blown into that because they thought it was politically expedient for him. Amash basically was like, no, I'm going to just stick with my values. And I mean, or the reason why he's not in Congress is because he
Yeah.
was basically the only Republican that voted to impeach Trump in 2019, right? So, and that
Hmm.
destroyed his political career. But there comes a point, in my opinion, where you kind of have to like make a decision as to what's more important, political expediency or your values, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so if I'd say one thing I've been disappointed to see from him has been that. But I mean, we're talking about a mayor, right? It's not like he's in Congress. It's a different thing.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah, that is my big issue. That would be the only thing I'd highlight about Kane. But I mean, I policy wise, some of the things are good.
Unfortunately, neutrality comes at a premium.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. I mean, well, at some point you can't really be neutral, right? I mean, if you
Yeah.
have a
Hmm.
decision like especially if you're in Congress, you have to vote. So either and not voting is a choice,
Yeah.
right? So you can't really even stay on the fence. You have to decide which camp you're in.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of it. The one thing I wish Kane would have done would have just been like, I mean, I don't know. Did he really have to throw red meat all the time? Does he really have to go full blown and post pictures of him with Trump and talk about how great Trump is? I mean, like,
Yeah.
I don't know whether he's got the values and he's just kind of throwing up a layer to like help his
I think
political
Hmm.
I think it's
that
kayfabe. He's trying to
I
blend.
think yeah.
he's trying to what?
He's trying to blend principle
Yeah.
with
He's
with
yeah
politics.
playing a
It's
playing a role.
dangerous. Yeah, but
It
I mean
is.
that's
It's
like a
very
dangerous
dangerous.
thing. I mean, it
Hmm.
really is because I mean, like, come on, like you like that's the argument that people like I don't know, like Rand Paul. I get Rand Paul and Thomas Massey are still like right on the cusp. Like Rand Paul and Thomas Massey
Hmm.
this year, I don't think even endorse
Yeah.
Trump, but I'm sure they will. But like somebody like Mike Lee, you know, like the logic that they make in their mind is like, okay, well, I've got these values, but in order to stay in Congress, I got to play games. And inherently, they throw away all their values by doing that. I mean, Trump, like, we saw what happened. I mean, it led to like he led to the biggest wealth transfer from small businesses to multinational corporations in the history of the world with like these COVID lockdowns. He
Yeah.
increased the debt more than any other president in history before him. He passed more gun control than any president since the 80s.
Yeah.
Hmm.
He tried to overturn an election and stop the peaceful transfer of power. And I look at all those things and I'm like, okay, well, at some point you got to say, when do you get off the train? Like, what is your moment you get off? And it seems to me like either at this point, if you're still on the train, I deeply question your principles. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
But speaking of MAGA though, like how do you think for the future when Trump is gone, um, and all his supporters are going to need somewhere to go politically? How do you try to, because a lot of them really do, if you think about it, they all have some sort of libertarian idea. They just want to be left, they want to be left the fuck alone. And
well,
so how do
I don't
we,
even,
how,
I don't even know if I would
go
agree
ahead.
with that. The question though is about where the MAGA movement is headed. Like,
Yeah, where do you bring them in order to like maybe capture them and kind of make them capitulate to like more libertarian values? Like how do you use them in order to pursue the message of libertarian values and ideas?
I don't, I don't know. I mean, it's like there's some segment of the population. You say that you think some of them want to be left alone. I don't actually know if I agree with that. I think some of them want revenge and they want to see people suffer that they believe are the individuals that have hurt them. So I think that's
Mm,
the center of MAGA. It's
yeah.
it's an ideology that is centered around grievance. So it's like,
Hmm.
and it's some. I mean, I guess every kind of everything that's said, especially in this space, has a grain of truth, but it's also like fundamentally flawed. So everyone in that coalition, not everyone, but the majority of the people in that coalition have some group or something that they
Hmm.
think have taken things from them. In the case of MAGA, it's like the deep state, I think, and the deep state means different things to different people.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so at the center of MAGA, I think, is this desire, this grievance, and this desire to get back at people, and this desire to hurt some perceived entity that's harming them.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that's an ideology that centers around libertarian values, because I mean, libertarian values are basically saying, look, or I mean, like I like to use the word liberal values. I think libertarianism in the traditional sense is a subset of a liberal tradition, right? Which is the tradition of the founders. When I say liberal, I don't mean Democrat. I mean like classically liberal principles, right? And classically liberal principles are a big tent that libertarianism and all these different ideologies fits into. But like at the center of it is like a commitment to individual liberty. It's a commitment to private property and free exchange among people. I
Hmm.
think that it's a commitment, and I don't know how where you guys stand on this, but the classically liberal principle is centers around exactly what the founder said around embracing the rule of law and democratic. Like the rule of law basically is the opposite of the rule of man. It's the idea that we should have an entity and a law that exists that is not a dictate by a monarch or by a dictator or by some guy who's above the law. It's this concept that there is no such thing as any individual in the country that's bigger than the law. Like that concept in and of itself, I think is incredibly important. But at the center of MAGA is this desire to like, no, we need to put a man above it to fix everything and to get
Yeah.
revenge on everyone that has grieved us. And it really is at fundamental odds with liberalism and even the core of libertarian philosophy. So I think that some of them can be brought into different movements, but I kind of feel like the most important thing right now is making sure that urge does not infect American society. And I think the thing that kind of gives them energy, or at least like gives that movement momentum, is like this idea that I mean, like seeing wins. So if you could defeat them and you can make sure that they don't win again,
Yeah.
which you did in 2020, and Trump goes away. I don't know if it's going to be in the same form that it's been. I mean, Andrew,
Hmm.
Andrew, remember this? We were talking in 2016. Like, the MAGA movement is characteristically different than what it was in 2016. It's a
Hmm.
lot more grievance focused now. It's kind of morphed into something completely even worse than it was in 2016. And I think that a lot of it is centered around this cult of Trump. So I think when it does go away, those
Hmm.
people might fracture into different groups. Some
Yeah.
people think I'm completely wrong by saying that. Some people think it is a coherent thing that'll just rally around some new strongman. But like, I
Oh,
think that there's so
it's
much tied up in Trump. Not to
yeah,
talk your ear
it's
off.
definitely yeah, it's definitely a cult. I mean, there's definitely a segment that is really too far up Trump's
Yeah.
bottom side. I mean, yeah. So I mean, some people, I think you're exactly right on one end. Like most of it, you have these core group that are very much just I hate everything. I want to just derail it all, knock it down, and then let's like install Trump as emperor of the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And then where I'm looking at, I guess, in my different perspective is then you have those that are willing to kind of divorce some values to tie themselves to Trump, thinking that maybe with Trump, he can erode all the corruption of like the bureaucratic state. Obviously, that didn't happen the first time, and it's probably not going to happen this time around, but they're
And
still
those are the good
hanging
faith
on.
arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those, well,
So like,
the good faith actors, and I
hmm.
know many of them. Like, that's actually, I think, the bulk
Hmm.
of Trump supporters. To be honest with you guys, I don't want to say all of them are lost. Like, I've had members of my
Hmm.
family that are voting for Trump. I think it is that
Hmm.
idea. It's like this kind of like bargain. It's like, oh well, I don't really like the guy. I don't think he's gonna. I think the
Hmm.
institutions are gonna check him, and if he gets into power, then maybe he'll reduce the bureaucratic mess that's caused this. I don't think everyone's in a bad faith effort, but I think the movement, and especially Trump and many of the people that drive it, are operating in bad faith, and they kind of stand in opposition to, well, first of all, the Constitution, which
Yeah.
Hmm.
like they genuinely do not like the Constitution, and they want to. I mean, Trump called to terminate the Constitution, so like that seems to me to
Oh,
be completely out of step with anything that I'm willing to embrace. But
Yeah.
I don't know where. Actually, I ask you guys a question. I'm curious because I went through and looked at your show and saw some of the guests that you guys have on. You guys seem to have a pretty ideologically diverse lineup. But as people that are kind of more in the agorist tradition, um, like one of the things that I'm as a classical liberal, I am not. I believe in like the Constitution, right? Like, so I want to see
hmm.
democratic processes, and I want to see like
An effective
the
framework.
institute. Yeah, exactly. I want to
Hmm.
see what really the thing I'm going at is I want to see the institutions of America working the way they should. And I think part of the reason why MAGA exists is because they've stopped working the way they should. Rather than embracing the
Hmm.
strong man, my time would rather be focused on fixing the institutions, like fixing the way that we vote on things, fixing all those things. But I mean, have you guys seen the same thing I have? I've been very shocked by this. I've seen people of the kind of ANCAP tradition weirdly embracing Trump in many cases. I mean, that's not all the time. I've seen many principled
Hmm.
ANCAPs that are just not that way. But do you have any thoughts on like what has led to that? Like why that even happens? Because that just seems to me inherently at odds with this kind of, you know what I mean? I mean, have you guys seen the same thing
Hmm.
I've seen at all? I mean, I've been in the movement for a while. I've seen a lot of people that I've like respected that are in cap space, like kind of going in on the Trump thing, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
Andrew.
Well, I mean, I know there's from what I've observed, there's like two strands of what ANCAP means. One's a more authoritarian strand, and one's more neutral, uh, peace-oriented strand. But I do know from my perspective of the Enneagram, especially as Type 8 Enneagram,
I
the
think I'm also a type
Challenger,
8.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're definitely interested in theatrics to illustrate a problem. So they'll draw out a problem into the open so they can expose it at a great personal cost. And I think that's what Trump's strategy is, at least from my perspective. It's in his instincts.
So it's almost
Sho-
like they
A
want
shock and
to.
awe.
It's kind of like an accelerationist
Mhm.
argument.
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, actually, that makes sense to me. I
yeah.
don't like it, but it makes sense to me.
But I mean,
Sort
it's
of like,
turning
yeah.
a lot of traditional quote unquote conservatives against the law, the legal system as it is, against law enforcement and stuff, saying, "Hey, this is corrupt. This isn't how we behave as Americans."
Yeah.
Sort of like
Well,
this concept of being a collapsitarian. Like, let's leech on to this Trump guy and watch and see and if he can just collapse the whole system, bring it down, and then we can maybe we can start anew with our Ancapistan where we're all kings. So
yeah, and
like
see,
the J Reg song.
yeah, I just don't think that makes any sense to me because I'm like, what's going to happen in the absence of any sort of like coherent framework for us to all agree to work together in a peaceful way, which is what effectively democracy is. It's like this process where we
Hmm.
can say, we're not going to shoot each other. We're going to go here and we're going to make a decision, right? In the
Yeah,
absence of that, liberty does not increase.
Hmm.
It really doesn't. Like, I mean, just because there's not, that's the thing I don't understand with the ANCAP world is like they seem very focused on the state as basically the only entity that can undermine your rights. And don't get me wrong, I agree that the state can do many things to undermine your rights, but the private actors can do that too. I mean, like if I'm
yeah,
in an environment where I don't
Hmm.
have like law enforcement, I've got, ammo and guns and whatever and food growing in my backyard, whatever. I could have militias come to my front door and demand all my ammunition and do whatever that, you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
that could happen.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand the collapsitarian narrative. Like I have an immense amount of respect for ANCAPs that are like, look, I'm going to do what I can within my own personal capacity. I'm going to withdraw from, say, the political space. I'm going to do what we talked about earlier. I'm going to grow my own food. I'm going to meet my neighbors. I'm going to like do that. But these guys that are like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to vote for the guy that I think is going to escalate the end of America's democratic systems. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if liberty is your guiding principle here. I kind of think it's more like you just want to fuck people over, or you have this fantasy that's not grounded in reality. Because again, I want to expand human liberty. That's something I want to do. And I don't think Trump destroying the Constitution is the best way to do that. Like the Constitution has been the best guarantor of human liberty that's ever existed in the history of humanity, right?
so far.
So far.
So far, yeah. I mean, it
Now
has its faults. So,
we gotta make some
yeah.
amendments. Yeah.
So, and as old Lysander Spooner would argue, it wouldn't be it's not fit to exist because what has it done at the moment because of what we have now. So, like, how do we get to the place where maybe the Constitution means something, or and as the Constitution, more like the Bill of Rights, realistically, because I mean, there's a lot of things in the Constitution that you could kind of interpret, hey, this is centralized power, I mean,
Well, I mean,
with taxes, but the Bill of Rights kind of saves that. So, like, how do we get more of use out of the Bill of Rights as our tool, as our what was the word, modus operandi? Yeah,
modus
I
operandi.
think
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
yeah, there we go. I'm not Italian, right, Angela?
Or Latin.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's Italian, SpongeBob.
No, I
So
mean there's I mean the Constitution is not perfect by any means. I definitely agree
no.
with that. It's not a perfect
Yeah,
document, but that's kind of why I find, and maybe this is why I piss off half the libertarian community, is I am an unapologetic Constitution stan in the sense that I'm like, look, the in the absence of law, the rule of law, you have
Hmm.
the rule of man, right? Or the rule of a dictator, the rule of a monarch, the rule of the local warlord. And I think that if you look in the aggregate, and again, the thing that is difficult in libertarian spaces, I think libertarians, right, and in a good way, I don't think they're coming from a position of bad faith, but they look at principles in a very black and white way. So they're like,
Hmm.
I've got to pay taxes, so this is all fucked. Like we got to throw this whole thing away. And I'm like, look, I
Hmm.
mean, yes, there are concessions, there are things that we don't like about the system, but like in the aggregate, it has led to great prosperity, great freedom. I mean, we're sitting here on a podcast. We could have these conversations. We can say, fuck Joe Biden, fuck Donald Trump, and not go to jail, right? I mean, there's value in like the ability for us to have, there's a lot of things that the Constitution's guaranteed that would not be guaranteed in the absence of it. And so I think in the aggregate, it's been a net positive. But as with anything, the liberal tradition is never set. It's not, you're never fully realize those values. You have to always refine and improve on that experiment. And
it's an anchor.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly. No one's been a perfectly embraced liberal tradition, the liberal tradition. I mean, there are things now that we're going to look back on when we're like 80 about what we took for granted right now. And we're going to say that was completely crazy. I can't believe that we ever thought that as a society or whatever. But, the arc of progress is slow, but we got to move in that direction. And I think the best way to do that is a focus on reform and improvement of the system rather than the collapsitarian, let's tear everything down. Let's, burn everything down. I just think that's, I don't know. What did you say? Short time preference. It's like this idea like, okay, well, like I can't fix this in the long term. It's too much work. So I'm just going to fuck everything over. You know what I mean? I just don't know if that's smart.
Well,
I believe that's where, go ahead, Andrew.
I would say that I believe that what we're going through right now is actually a party-wide struggle session for the Republicans to try and get everybody on the same page.
We are in the middle of a major political realignment right now, societally. There's this great presentation that Steve Davies of the Institute for Economic Affairs put out, which I've watched several times now, and he's written a book on this from what I understand. But the alliances that I think, and this is again going back to the reason why I think half the libertarians hate me, is because I think that like this Reagan era alignment between constitutional conservatives, or like I guess Reagan type conservatives and libertarians, which has existed for like 50 years, is completely breaking apart because the Republican Party is becoming this kind of nationalist, authoritarian party. And all those coalitions are breaking down, and people are saying, who are my real allies? And they're kind of changing camps. Like I say, half the libertarians that I worked with in the 2010s, I'm like, now I don't know if they share the same values that I do, or they have the same priorities. And so that's it's a good time to live in, because it gives us all opportunities to kind of move this in a direction that's furthers human liberty. But it's also kind of a rough time to be involved in politics, because friendships and orgs are going through a lot of turmoil right now, including the Republican Party. The Republican Party is the textbook example of this,
Well, I think the last time that you had this rift with politics was when we went to war for about 4 years in 1861. So, and
keep going, Zach. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. And you said it like right there, like with the Republican Party is starting to kind of come into this rift, like this. They're trying to figure things out of where they stand in this new age, because the Democrats, they wield the power at this point. And I look at it like maybe what's happening is the Republican Party is kind of, we're repeating history. The Republican Party is becoming this more proto-nationalist in their region type say. Obviously, we're in 2024, not 1860, but you're starting to see more of the Republican Democrat connection and the Democrat Republican connection from the 1860s. So it's kind of flipped a little bit.
Yeah, I think that in my opinion, and this is again very controversial in libertarian spaces, but I'll throw it out there anyway. I've never voted for a Democrat in my entire life. Never have I done that. Never have I even considered voting for a Democrat in my entire life. But I am of the opinion, and this is what I touched on earlier, if we can find a way to defeat the MAGA infestation in the Republican Party, it will open up an opportunity for us, people that, when I say us, I mean people that care about individual liberty and whatnot, and then for limited government. It'll open up an opportunity for a rethinking within the Republican coalition, and it could theoretically result in a hugely positive change in the Republican Party. So I'm in that mindset. I'm not voting third party this year. My goal is to make sure MAGA does not win. Let's see if we can defeat and pull that cancer out of the GOP. hopefully we could open up a door in the GOP when they're rethinking everything to kind of reimagine what a Republican coalition should look like. And that could be an incredible opportunity for people that care about liberty and limited government, because as soon as we can get MAGA out of the way, we can, hopefully have a party that actually stands for those things again. Because right now it's basically a choice between status quo, which is, I think Biden kind of stands for the status quo, which is got problems. It's not great. It's not terrible. I mean, it's terrible in some ways. It's great in other ways, whatever. The status quo versus a guy who's a strongman who wants to come in and basically collapse the tyranny in this stuff, right? And so my thought is let's get that guy out of the way, rethink the Republican coalition, hopefully pull it towards limited government again, and we can hopefully have another opportunity in 2028. That's my logic. It's a lot of libertarians hate it, but that's kind of where I'm at in my head right now, to be honest with you. And this is coming from somebody who worked for 10 years in the Libertarian Party. I mean,
Yeah.
Andrew knows I ran monthly meetings in the Libertarian Party for 2.5 years. I knocked on thousands of doors. I've donated thousands of dollars of my own money. But I'm in a mindset now. I'm like, look, we just got to get this guy out of the way, and then we can have a conversation. He's going to be dead in a couple of years, right? So this is the last opportunity.
I think they're both going to be pretty much dead in a couple years.
I mean, they're both in their 80s now, right? So I mean, it's like it's only a matter of time.
I think 82, and I think Trump just turned 77. So
okay, yeah, he's almost there.
4 more years of Trump, he will be 81 when he finishes out. 4 more years of Biden, he would be 86.
Both of them were closer to the Civil War when they were born than to today.
Yeah.
That should.
Thoughts on RFK or Chase Oliver in the mix?
So I actually am personal friends with Chase. I think he's a person with great character. Like he's a good person. I like him. I think he's got good values. I disagree with a lot of his foreign policy takes, which is also another reason why the libertarians hate me. I actually would, in many normal years, be voting for the libertarian ticket, but one of the reasons why I'm not supporting him actively or like promoting him is because at this year there's no viable path for the Libertarian Party to victory. So after the Mises PAC takeover of the party in 2022, I mean, we know the party had 50 state ballot access for years. I mean, our candidate in 2016 was polling like higher than RFK was in several points in time.
That is true.
And in 2022, the party basically started its escalated decline and collapse. It's like lost over half of its members. It's at revenue all-time lows. It's lost ballot access in several states. It's actually, as you guys probably are aware, several state parties are refusing to even put Chase on the ballot. And I think this puts it all in perspective. Like in 2016, and you have to check my numbers on this, but I'll give you the rough numbers. In 2016, around, a couple weeks after the nomination, Gary Johnson had raised like $1.5 million or something. Joe Jorgensen, whose campaign I also helped with, raised like about $600,000. Chase's campaign, I think, was sitting around like $20,000. And I don't think that's necessarily a comment on Chase. I'm not trying to like throw him under the bus or say he's like a failure of a candidate. I think he's inherited a completely dysfunctional party. And I think the movement, the libertarian movement, as we have understood it, is in a full-blown identity crisis, and it's kind of in a collapse right now. So, I mean, the reason why I actually started a political PAC and a C4 called Project Liberal is because I believe that the liberty movement, as it's defined, needs to zoom out. So libertarians need to zoom out, and they say they need to recenter their values around liberalism, which means focusing on the most important values that we have, which I think we talked about earlier. That's individual liberty, free trade, and private property. That's, I think it's a commitment to democratic institutions and this concept that we should have a peaceful transfer, just this idea of democracy as Mises described it. And we should zoom out, say, these are our basic principles. These are very broadly accepted principles, and we should kind of rethink how our movement fits into that space. And so, and that is not a partisan effort. It's more of just like, hey, we need to build a grassroots movement around like these broad values. But yeah, so Chase's campaign, I think, is dealing with a lot of really difficult things. And I don't know if he's going to be able to even, I don't think he has an electoral path to the White House. So I don't personally want to especially in the
Yeah.
context of what I just mentioned to you two. Like I do see Trump as
Yeah.
kind of like a guy who's really just doesn't care about the Constitution. I don't want him to get near power. I don't know if you guys are RFK fans at all, but I don't want to shit on RFK too long because I know we're gonna run out of time. But I'm also not a fan of RFK. I think he's trying to get. There's a lot of policy reasons. I don't. I mean, I could go into some of them. Like if that's something you guys want me to do, but I'm also not a
I
fan of
mean,
RFK for a variety of different reasons. A little bit
Yeah,
different
I'm not a
situation.
mark.
Say it again.
I mean,
I,
he's
I'm
not
not a mark. I'm not a fan.
Yeah. I don't know. It's funny to me
Yeah.
that there are a lot of people in the libertarian space that were like huge fans of RFK. And I'm like, the guy was like, he was like endorsing the Green New Deal. He's calling to
Yep.
like federalize the mortgage industry. He wants to introduce like this new wealth tax.
hmm
He is, you know, again, I think
He's
that,
a
say it again.
he's a quintessential socialist, really. I mean, he just was good on his ideas with, I guess, with COVID and the vaccine mandates, and I mean,
He
he was
seems,
against that.
yeah,
But
he
other than
seems like,
that, every
yeah, he seems like politically schizophrenic to me. Like he seems like he's
mm,
left on some things and then like far right on other things. One of the things he said the other day that really scared the fuck out of me was like, first of all, as much as much as I agree with you guys that we should be growing our own food and like understanding our food supply, he's got this
hmm
weird stuff about like banning chemical fertilizer, and like he's got this obsession with like he says like all of our food is poisoning us and stuff. And
hmm
like banning chemical fertilizer, which is something he had said in a podcast the other day, like I want to like restrict chemical fertilizer. I don't think people understand like how horrifying that would be, like the result of that would be. I mean,
hmm
like most of the food, like the food supply only exists. We can only produce this level of food because of these really sophisticated developed fertilizers that exist that can create the yields that can actually feed millions of people. When you get to a
hmm
conversation where you're talking about like messing with the food supply chain to that degree, that actually is the kind of shit that I almost think makes him more dangerous than Trump. Because I mean, you want to talk about not having food on the shelves? You start messing with that food supply stuff, and you start seeing some really big systemic problems. Like if you have an issue with chemical fertilizer,
hmm
then buy organic, grow your own food. But like
hmm
factory, like the industrialization of food is
Yeah.
the only way society operates, period.
Yeah.
And if you want to mess with that, a lot of people go hungry. So
hmm
that's the shit that scares me about RFK, to be honest with you. And
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
like nuanced. It's not even something a lot of people are even thinking about.
yeah, like speaking of the front, I mean that's anti-market. I mean, let people make a choice. I
Agreed.
mean, yeah. I mean, you can't
Label
just
it.
force.
Yeah, like let consumers decide what
Hmm
they want to do. If you want to buy
Yep.
organic and spend more money, go do it. But when you start saying that kind of stuff, start scaring the shit out of me a little bit. I gotta
hmm
feed my kids, you
Yeah.
know.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. That is, yeah. And then of course the Green New Deal with the his agreement towards climate lockdowns and his gun grabbing, and
Yeah, he
we could
did.
go
He
on and
did.
on.
He's been like, I actually was on a podcast the other day with a bunch of RFK fans, and I brought up the assault weapon thing, and they were like, "Oh, he changed
Hmm
his mind on that." I'm like, "Yeah, but you know, he did. He said he wanted to ban assault weapons several times. I mean, to be fair, I just
hmm
said I'm going to be voting for a Democrat. Like I know Biden said that, so I get it. We just boil it down to policy. But you know, it goes back for honestly, it really just goes back to me for like, dude, I feel like it's very, very important that we defeat MAGA this year. It's very, very
Yeah.
important that we make sure that movement is
Yeah.
collapsed. And I don't know if RFK or Chase or any third party candidate is going to help in that effort. Like if I could tell Chase to do anything, it would be run to Trump's right. Be very clear as to what failures Trump has done that the right wing in the United States disagrees with. And that would be stuff like the COVID lockdowns. That would be stuff
hmm
like his gun control efforts. That'd be stuff like his crazy spending. Really call that out, because the Libertarian
hmm
Party candidate does have a bit of power, and his power, the power of that candidate in years past, his or her power, centers around the ability to kind of attack a candidate from one of their flanks because they have the ability to do
hmm
that. And if he does that, then he could help with this effort to undermine MAGA's coalition. That's what I would tell them to do, and I have told them to do that. I don't know if they'll listen to me though. So, but I'm about
well,
at time. I don't know if we have any other things you guys want to cover on my end or anything else like we should chat about.
Andrew, you got anything else to
No, this has
add,
been a
rebut?
pretty productive conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
I'm
thank
sorry
you.
it took me 3 months. I've been like crazy backlogged, but I appreciate you guys taking time to chat, and hopefully your audience doesn't hate me too much. We'll see how it goes.
Well, if you're not offending somebody, you're
Hey,
not getting over. So
That's right.
exactly. We're wrestling fans here, so everything's a work. So, or is it a rip? Maybe
I
it's a
love it.
shoot. So,
I love it.
so,
yeah.
Well,
but
if your
thank you.
audience, I was gonna say, if your audience does want to shit on me a little bit or tell me why I'm wrong, they can check me out on Twitter at Josh Eckle, and we can talk about it. So that's great. I appreciate the time,
There you
though.
go, an invitation, everybody. So if you want to just shit talk, get into Twitter wars, or maybe you do have something that you side along Josh with, follow him right there on Twitter, and that'll be in the description as well. So anything else that you would like to plug out or scream at the top of your lungs, Josh, before we let go?
No, I will say if you are interested in, I'll plug two things. So if you are interested in this zooming out that I was talking about, this building a new liberal coalition, check out Project Liberal at projectliberal.org. You can follow us at Project Liberal on Twitter as well. We're about to make a pretty big announcement and put out a big live event, and we'll be bringing people in to talk about the project, answer questions, things like that. So you can get on the mailing list at projectliberal.org/join. I also work for a 501c3 nonprofit called Students for Liberty, and they're doing amazing work. So if you're like a young activist or a young libertarian or classical liberal, and you want to get the tools that you need to go out into your career and make an impact and fight for pro-liberty ideas, you could also apply for the local coordinator program and get those resources at join.studentsforliberty.org. But no, I appreciate the time, guys. That's all I got.
No,
Thank you very much.
thank you again, Josh, for coming on board with us. So it's always interesting to hear the other side of the libertarian wing. So because there's all sorts of perspectives. So Andrew, you got anything to add to end
This
to
meme,
send us off?
this meme is not available in your country. This says
This meme is not available. So we're
yeah.
all going to become the EU pretty soon. So with that, thank you again, Josh. That's Andrew Joseph. That's Lysander Spooner behind me. Uh, I'm not even going to try. This is The Legacy, right? I'm Zachary Kaiser, the legacy of Jennifer and Kaiser. And let's send it all off and let's unify the world like with different perspectives and agree to disagree or disagree to agree. I don't know. So, peace out, everyone.
Thanks for watching.